The first thing I heard was my wife screaming. A second later, the bedroom door burst open and three men dressed in black rushed inside with flashlights and guns. Before I could even get out of bed, one of them slammed me onto the floor and shoved my face into the carpet. We had lived in a quiet suburb for almost 6 years. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other and kids rode their bikes until sunset. Nothing like this had ever happened there. At first, I thought it was just a robbery. They zip-tied my hands behind my back. They dragged my wife into the hallway. Our teenage son ran out of his room, confused. They threw him against the wall and tied him up too. None of us dared to fight back. One of the men kept yelling, "Where is he? Tell us where you hid him." I had no idea what he was talking about. I kept telling them they had the wrong house. He answered by punching me so hard my ears started ringing. Meanwhile, another man was tearing apart the second floor. Cabinet doors slammed, drawers crashed onto the floor. Then everything went silent, not normal silence. The kind where every tiny sound feels dangerous. I could hear heavy breathing behind one of the masks. Then someone gave a short command, "Check the basement." A few seconds later, the noise started again. Something heavy hit the floor. Glass shattered. One of the attackers grabbed my wife by the arm and pressed a gun against her shoulder. "If you're lying," he said, "someone dies tonight." At that moment, I was sure none of us were getting out alive. Then we heard something outside. A car door slammed. Voices. All three men froze. One of them looked through the front window.
"Police."
Everything happened at once. The front door flew open. Officers shouted for everyone to get down. One of the attackers fired a shot. Another tried to run out the back of the house. The hallway turned into complete chaos. People screaming. More gunshots. Someone crashed through the kitchen table. Less than a minute later, it was over. All three men were arrested. One officer cut the zip ties off my wrists, while another asked if anyone in my family was hurt. Later that morning, a detective sat with us in our destroyed living room. That's when he told us something I'll never forget. The person who called 911 was our neighbor. He lived at 1845B. When he heard the screaming coming from our house, he called the police immediately. But it turned out he was the real target. According to the investigators, the attackers had come for him. They believed he had something they wanted. Later, detectives said they believed the attack had been planned by his business rivals who wanted him out of the way. They had planned everything: the guns, the masks, the zip ties. But in the dark, they mixed up one letter in the address. Instead of breaking into 1845B, they broke into 1845A, our house. We moved away a few months later, but even now, I still wake up whenever I hear a car stop outside my house at night. Because the scariest thing I've ever learned is that sometimes your entire life can depend on a single mistake. Just one letter in an address, and that mistake can cost an innocent family their lives. The scariest thing is realizing all the warning signs were right in front of you, and you ignored every single one. A few years ago, I rented a small house on the outskirts of Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was late autumn. I had just started a new job. Most days I worked late and didn't get home until the evening. The house was really just a place to eat, take a shower, and sleep. So when little strange things started happening, I assumed the problem was me. It started with the kitchen light. Several times I came home from work and found it turned on, even though I was sure I had turned it off before leaving that morning. After long work days, I figured my memory was just getting worse. Then I started thinking my food was disappearing faster than it should. I'd open the refrigerator and couldn't remember how much bread I had left. Sometimes it felt like I had just bought a pack of cheese, but it was almost gone. The bottles of water seemed to disappear too. My towel in the bathroom would be hanging a little differently. My coffee mug would be sitting in a different spot. One day, my jacket was hanging on a different hook. None of those things seemed important by themselves, but over time, there were more and more of them. A few months went by. The little things never stopped. They were too small to make me panic, but there were too many of them to completely ignore. I honestly started believing I was becoming forgetful. I thought the long hours and lack of sleep were finally catching up with me. Sometimes I heard quiet creaks above me at night. The house was made of wood. The weather kept getting colder. I convinced myself it was just the roof reacting to the cold. One weekend, my friend Melissa came over. We ordered pizza, turned on a movie, and spent the evening talking. About halfway through the movie, we heard a dull thump above us. We both looked at the ceiling. I laughed and told her the house made noises like that all the time when it got cold outside. A few minutes later, we heard it again. This time it sounded different, like someone slowly taking a few careful steps. Melissa didn't take her eyes off the ceiling. I told her this had been happening for months. The strange noises, the little things around the house, the lights, the food. I always found some normal explanation for everything. She listened without saying a word. Then we heard it again. A slow, heavy creak, right above us. Melissa looked at me with fear in her eyes. She said that wasn't the house. She told me to call 911 immediately. The police arrived a few minutes later. They searched every room, the basement, the yard, nothing. Then one of the officers walked around outside and noticed a small roof window leading into the attic. It wasn't locked. They climbed inside through the window. Everything went quiet. Then we heard shouting. Something crashed. More shouting. A minute later, they brought out a thin man wearing a dirty prison uniform. The officers told me he was an escaped inmate. They believed he had been hiding in my attic for months. He had climbed in through that unlocked roof window shortly after escaping. As the weather got colder, the attic became the perfect place to hide. During the day, while I was at work, he came downstairs, ate my food, drank my water, and used my house like it was his own. At night, he barely moved so no one would hear him. I moved out a few days later, and now, whenever I can't find something in my house, my first thought is never that I forgot where I left it. Enjoying the stories? Subscribe and press like. Now, story 3. I still don't know what was outside my house that night. I checked the yard. I watched the security footage. I even went outside the next morning looking for any kind of clue. But the strangest part was that there was almost nothing except for a few wet footprints near my front door. And I still think about the moment when I realized the sound I was hearing was not random. This happened about 2 years ago when I was living alone in Knoxville, Tennessee. I was working from home at the time, so I spent most of my days inside. I lived in a small house in a quiet neighborhood where almost nobody walked around at night. It was a normal rainy evening in late fall. It had been raining almost all day. After work, I made dinner, turned on the TV, and sat on the couch. Nothing felt unusual. The neighborhood was quiet. The only sound was the rain hitting the windows. Around 10 o'clock that night, I heard a knock at the door. It wasn't loud, just 3 quick knocks. At first, I thought it was a neighbor or maybe someone who had the wrong house. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I waited a few seconds, then opened the door. There was only rain outside. The porch was wet, but there were no footprints on it. I looked toward the sidewalk in front of the house, but I didn't see anyone there either. I decided maybe I imagined it. About 10 minutes later, I sat back down on the couch. That's when I heard another sound. This time it came from the kitchen. Someone knocked on the window. I immediately froze. The kitchen window was on the side of the house, and because of the slope next to the wall, it was about 6 feet off the ground. It wasn't an easy window to reach. I slowly walked over and looked outside. Nothing. Just rain and darkness. I turned on the outdoor light, but there was nobody there. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a branch or something blown by the wind. But a few minutes later, I heard it again, the exact same sound. 3 knocks. That was when I stopped feeling comfortable. I checked every lock in the house. The doors were locked. The windows were closed. I even opened the security camera on my phone because I wanted to know what was happening. A few minutes later, I got a motion alert. The camera detected movement. I opened the recording. It only showed my backyard in the rain, nothing else. But right at that moment, I heard another sound from the other side of the house. Someone was trying the door handle. Slowly, I stood in the hallway and stared at the door. The handle moved down, once, then again. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 5 seconds, maybe 30. I was too scared to even move. After that, I did the only thing I could think of. I turned on every light in the house. Every single one. Then, I turned my music up as loud as possible. I didn't want whoever was outside to think I was alone and afraid. I stayed like that until morning. When it finally got light outside, I checked the house. The locks were fine. The windows were still closed. There was no damage anywhere. Only a few footprints in the mud near the front door. They started near the road and ended right in front of my porch. And then they stopped. I never found out who it was or what they wanted. But after that night, I never leave my house completely dark when I'm alone. Because even now, I still don't know what was standing outside my door that night.